In the hush of early spring, when the wind still carried a bite of winter and the trees were bare silhouettes against a leaden sky, John Holloway stood in his parlour with a trembling hand, clutching a child's drawing. It was crayon, red mostly, with sharp black lines, the kind of thing a quiet 7-year-old might scribble while the world spun on. Only this drawing wasn't innocent. It wasn't whimsical. It was a funeral. A wooden coffin stood at the centre, carried by 4 faceless men. A woman wept by a headstone. Behind them, a church steeple bent slightly, as if leaning toward the dead. The name scrawled at the bottom chilled his bones. Mr. Griggs. That morning, word had spread like wildfire through Cold Spring Hollow. Reverend Griggs had died in his sleep. Natural causes, they said. Peaceful, they said. But Anna Lee had drawn this picture yesterday, and now John couldn't breathe. If you're drawn to tales where darkness hides in plain sight, where truth slips between shadows and whispers, subscribe now. This story is only beginning. 2 years had passed since Sarah Holloway succumbed to fever, leaving John a hollowed-out man and Anna Lee a motherless child. Grief had a way of warping time in the hollow. Folks said it moved slower here, as if sorrow dragged on the hours. John had buried his wife with calloused hands and a numbed heart, then returned to the mines a week later. He had no choice. Cole didn't wait for morning. Anna Lee changed after that. She didn't cry, not once. She sat at the foot of her bed for hours with her box of crayons, always the same ones, worn but whole. The red one, in particular, became her favorite. She carried it like other girls carried dolls. Some evenings John would find her asleep with red smudges on her fingers, drawings scattered on the floor around her like silent witnesses. She spoke little, but when she did it was always soft, never angry, never loud. Cold Spring Hollow wasn't a place that welcomed difference. It had its rhythms, its rules, and a long memory. The town clung to its old ways with clawed fingers. Superstition braided into daily life like laces on boots. People read omens in birds and frost. They whispered of old spirits in the hills, and everyone had a tale about the crone in the woods, a ghost woman with red eyes who marked children with strange talents. John never bought into that nonsense, not until the drawing. He stared at it again now, the red lines seeming almost wet, as if the crayon had bled onto the paper. Reverend Griggs had baptized Anna Lee just last spring. He remembered the way she had flinched when the holy water touched her brow. No one else noticed, but John did. And now Griggs was dead. He tucked the drawing into the drawer of his writing desk and paced the room. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots. Somewhere upstairs Anna Lee was humming, a lilting, tuneless sound. She hummed like that sometimes when she drew, as if the crayon guided her hand, not the other way around. He climbed the stairs slowly and pushed open her door. The room was dim, lit only by the grey light seeping through lace curtains. Anna sat cross-legged on the rug, her sketchpad balanced on her knees. She didn't look up. "What are you drawing, Pumpkin?" he asked, his voice tighter than he meant it to be. "Just lines," she said. "Can I see?" She hesitated, then turned the pad toward him. It was just that. Lines, red ones, arcing across the page in strange circular patterns, like symbols he didn't recognize. He nodded and tried to smile. "All right, just dinner soon." She didn't answer. That night, after she'd gone to bed, he went to the church. He needed to see for himself, needed to be sure. He stood among the mourners, eyes darting between faces and the pine box at the altar. When they lifted the coffin, his breath caught. 4 men carried it, just like the drawing. The steeple creaked in the wind, bowing as if mourning. A woman sobbed by the aisle. It was all there. Every detail, the coincidence was too precise, too clean. As the procession ended, someone touched his arm. It was Mabel, the preacher's wife. "She's a strange little one, your Anna," she whispered. "You tell her to stop making pictures of people before they die." John blinked. "You saw it?" She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, her black veil fluttering like a bat's wing. That night sleep evaded him. He sat by the fire, Anna's drawings spread across the floor before him. Most were harmless, flowers, trees, clouds, but there were others. A man falling into a pit, a horse rearing in terror, a church on fire, and everyone signed at the bottom in the same childish scrawl, A.L. He closed his eyes, but the image of Griggs's coffin burned behind his lids. Something was wrong, something had started. It started with whispers, quiet ones at first, curling through the town like chimney smoke, subtle but acrid. By the end of the week, 3 different people had come to John Holloway with lowered voices and nervous glances, each asking, "Did Anna draw something again?" One of them was Ruthie Bell, who ran the grocer's with her husband. Her brother, a logger from across the ridge, had died in a freak accident. The tree he was felling split wrong, crushed his leg, and he bled out before help arrived. Ruthie claimed Anna had drawn a man lying under a tree 4 days earlier. John didn't want to believe it. He told himself it was all nonsense, tricks of coincidence, but the pattern kept spreading like mildew in a damp room. Then came Mrs. Dobbins, a midwife who'd helped deliver Anna herself. She stood in John's doorway, pale and shaking. "Your little girl, she drew my dead boy, before he passed, the blanket, the cradle, even the rosary I tucked under his pillow. I didn't tell no one about that. How'd she know?" John tried to calm her. "Kids draw strange things, that's all. She don't mean no harm." But Mrs. Dobbins only stared. "That's not a child's hand making those pictures. That's something else." At the schoolhouse, the change was even more obvious. Anna sat alone at recess, her crayons spread like a ritual before her. No one approached her anymore. The other children whispered, called her ghost girl and witchling. One boy spat on her drawing pad. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. Her teacher, Mrs. Winthrop, wrote a letter home requesting a conference. She'd noticed Anna growing distant, distracted, always drawing when she should be listening. "There's something not right," she wrote in precise script. "She stares sometimes, at nothing, as if she hears someone I can't." John folded the letter and slid it into his coat. He didn't reply. One night after supper, he watched Anna crouched by the hearth sketching with deep concentration. Her red crayon moved in looping strokes. When she finished, she held the paper out without a word. The image sent a cold ripple through his spine. It was a road, winding through trees, and at its end a procession of mourners. He could see their outlines, vague but heavy with sorrow. In the foreground stood a tall woman with her back turned, black skirt, grey bun, long shawl. Beneath it a single name, Miss Clara. Clara Watkins, the elderly baker, had just returned from a trip to Charleston. She'd been in good health, spry and sharp-tongued. That same week she slipped on her porch and broke her neck. By then the town had taken notice, not just individuals, everyone. At the tavern, conversations halted when John entered. Eyes tracked him like a contagion. He heard it once as he walked past the barbers. "Holloway's girl draws death. Touched, that one." The word touched held a deep fear in Cold Spring Hollow. It didn't mean blessed, it meant cursed. John's rational mind began to fracture. He told himself there had to be explanations. Children drew coffins. Accidents happened. People aged, people died. But Anna's timing, her precision, it clawed at reason. And then there was the crayon. She used others, yes, blue for skies, green for hills, but the red one, it never changed. It didn't wear down, didn't dull. It stayed sharp, vibrant, untouched by time. He tried to swap it once, sneaking it from her box while she slept. The next morning it was back in her hand. The replacement crayon lay broken in two on the table. The old legends stirred in his mind, stories told by lantern light and whiskey breath, of objects that held spirits, of children marked by unseen things, of the red-eyed crone who walked the woods and chose her vessels not with malice, but hunger, for sorrow, for stories. John didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in work, in sweat, in coal under fingernails. But something dark had slipped into his daughter's world, and he didn't know how to get it out. He started locking her drawings in a chest. Every night, after she slept, he'd gather them up, sometimes 10 or 12 a day, and hide them. Still more would appear under his pillow, tucked in his boot, stuffed between the pages of the Bible. And the drawings grew more complex. Not just funerals now, but symbols. Crosses wrapped in thorns, eyes without pupils, a tree with bleeding bark, things that made his hands tremble when he touched the paper. Anna never smiled, she never cried. She just drew, day after day, humming a tune that had no melody, and John began to fear something deeper than death. He feared his daughter might not be alone when she drew. Mrs. Winthrop was a practical woman. She believed in manners, arithmetic, and the value of a clean slate. When she stepped off the narrow wagon path and approached the Holloway homestead that Tuesday afternoon, she wasn't thinking of legends or curses. She was thinking of a child who needed help. John answered the door, eyes sunken and coat dusted with ash. "Afternoon, ma'am." "I'd like a word, Mr. Holloway." "About Anna." He hesitated, then nodded. "Come in." The parlor smelled of coal smoke and something older, something like damp earth. Drawings littered the table, some half-burnt, others folded and crumpled. Mrs. Winthrop took a seat, smoothed her skirt, and adjusted her spectacles. "She's withdrawn," she began. "Doesn't respond to questions unless directly addressed, refuses to play. And the drawings, Mr. Holloway. Have you looked closely at them?" "I have," he said, voice hollow. "There are patterns, repeating images, symbols that resemble things I've seen in old folklore. One in particular keeps appearing, a circle with jagged edges, surrounded by eyes." John looked away. "I've seen it. She drew my house last week," she added more softly. "The roof caving in, people burning." John stiffened. "I thought it was just a child's imagination," she said. "But then last night I dreamt it, exactly as she drew it, every detail. I could feel the heat on my skin." He gripped the arm of the chair. "I don't scare easy," she went on. "I've taught for 30 years in mining towns, rail camps, even a prison school once. I've seen children scribble horrors, but this feels different." John rose abruptly and went to the mantel. He pulled a small stack of papers from a drawer, handed her one. "She drew this 3 days before Reverend Griggs passed. Look at the names on the tombstones." Mrs. Winthrop scanned it. Her mouth went dry. "That's my grandfather's name." She never met him. She folded the paper slowly, fingers trembling. "Have you spoken to anyone else?" "The sheriff." He shook his head. "They'd lock her up, or worse." Mrs. Winthrop stood, suddenly unsettled. "May I speak with her just a few minutes?" John hesitated, then silently led her up the stairs. Hannah was sitting by the window, bathed in dusty afternoon light, her red crayon tracing delicate arcs on a fresh sheet. She didn't look up when they entered. She hummed softly, the same wandering tune. "Hello, Anna," Mrs. Winthrop said gently. No response. "That's a lovely picture. What are you drawing today?" Anna paused. "The smoke," she whispered. "What smoke?" She tilted the paper. A house engulfed in flame. A woman standing in the doorway, her face turned away. In the background, trees twisted into shapes that looked like grasping hands. Mrs. Winthrop tried to steady her breath. "Why do you draw these things?" Anna blinked. "Because I see them. Before they happen." John shifted behind them. Mrs. Winthrop crouched beside the girl. "Who shows them to you, dear?" The crayon stopped moving. "She does." "Who's she?" "She lives in the woods. She watches the hill at night. She wears a veil made of hair. She whispers when it's quiet." Mrs. Winthrop felt her chest tighten. "What does she say?" Anna finally turned her head. Her eyes looked far too old for her small face. "She says I'm her hand now." The room fell silent, heavy with something thick and ancient. Mrs. Winthrop stood, heart pounding. She thanked John in a trembling voice and left quickly, nearly stumbling on the front step. As she walked back toward town, she looked over her shoulder at the house, timber leaning slightly, chimney puffing faint grey clouds, and felt the strange certainty that she'd never see it again. That night, wind howled through the hollow like a wounded thing. John sat by the hearth watching the flames flicker in anxious rhythm. Anna had gone to bed hours earlier, crayon still clutched in her hand. Then came a knock, soft, deliberate. He rose, heart galloping, and opened the door. No one. The wind hissed past him. The porch was empty, except for the faintest scent of sulphur, bitter and sharp. On the floorboards lay a scrap of paper. He bent down. It was a drawing. A woman in a long skirt stood before a house engulfed in flame. In her arms she cradled something too dark to see. At her feet, the red crayon had scribbled a single word: tomorrow. John didn't sleep that night. The drawing stayed on the mantel, its edges curling from the heat of the fire, the word tomorrow bleeding red across the bottom. He stared at it until his eyes burned, until the shadows on the wall began to twitch. When dawn broke, pale and colourless, he wrapped the paper in oilcloth and placed it deep in the drawer with the others. By midday, Cold Spring Hollow was buzzing. Mrs. Winthrop's house had burned to the ground. No one knew how it started. Some blamed the wood stove. Others swore they'd seen lightning, though the sky had been clear. What they all agreed on was this: she hadn't made it out. John stood among the gathered townsfolk, eyes fixed on the smouldering wreckage. He saw the scorched timbers, the blackened iron of the stove, the twisted remains of the front gate. And he remembered the drawing. Every detail had been there. He left before anyone could speak to him. Back home, Anna sat at the table drawing. Her eyes were distant, skin pallid. "Did you know, Anna?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. Her crayon moved in slow, deliberate arcs. He sat across from her, his voice strained. "You drew it. Her house. You knew." "She was loud," Anna said, not looking up. "She said I shouldn't draw anymore." John stared. "Anna, did you want her to die?" The crayon paused. "I don't make the drawings, I just see them." He felt the weight of her words. Heavy, final. That evening he opened the locked cabinet beneath the stairs, the place he kept what he feared most. Inside, wrapped in an old flour sack, was a notebook he hadn't noticed before, Anna's notebook. The cover was soft leather, too fine for a child's hands. The pages inside were filled with drawings, dozens, maybe more. Each was dated, each showed a scene of death or sorrow, drownings, hangings, shattered wagons, sickness, flame. The further he turned, the darker the drawings became. Faces twisted in pain, eyes scratched out, houses crumbling into black pits. Then, something worse. 30 pages, each labelled with a date. One for every day of the coming month. He scanned the dates. The last one was his birthday. On that page, Anna had drawn a man lying in a pine coffin. No name, just a red line scrawled beneath the picture. He slammed the book shut, chest heaving. It was a death calendar, and his day was coming. The next morning, he rode to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Whit Darnell was a wide-shouldered man with a stern brow and a mouth like a straight razor. He listened as John explained, voice shaking, notebook clutched in his hands. "She's just a girl," the sheriff said at last, thumbing through the pages. "A strange one, sure, but kids get ideas. These drawings come true, Whit. Ask around. Griggs, Clara, Winthrop. I've heard talk. Talk's not evidence." John leaned forward. "Look at the dates. She's predicting deaths." "And if it's true, I'm next." The sheriff lit a cigar and puffed, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. "What do you want me to do? Lock her up for sketching morbid pictures?" "No, I want this to stop." "You think she's doing it on purpose?" "I don't know," John whispered. "But something's wrong. That crayon, she draws even in her sleep, and the notebook. I never gave her this." "I've never seen it before." Whit exhaled slowly. "Leave it with me. I'll hold on to it for now." John hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he handed over the notebook. As he turned to leave, Whit added, "You ever think about getting a preacher involved?" "She already buried one," John said flatly and walked out. Back at home, the fire was dead. Anna sat curled by the cold hearth, her crayon tapping the stone rhythmically. She didn't look up when he entered. "I gave the sheriff your book," he said. She paused. "It doesn't matter." "Why not?" "They're already written." He moved closer. "Anna, what does that mean?" She finally met his eyes. "He'll try to burn it, but he won't find the real one." John froze. "What do you mean, the real one?" Her lips barely moved. "The real one is where she keeps them, in the hollow tree." He stepped back, unease crawling up his spine like frost. She resumed drawing. Later that night, He searched the sheriff's office. The notebook was there, locked in a drawer. He flipped to the end. His death page was gone. In its place, a drawing of a fire, a jailhouse burning. He staggered back, heart racing. The date was tomorrow. The red crayon never dulled. No matter how often Anna used it, how furiously she pressed it into the paper, it remained perfectly sharp. Its waxy surface shone as if freshly unwrapped, untouched by time or wear. John had tried to rationalize it. Maybe she used different crayons. Maybe he hadn't been paying close enough attention. But now, as he held it between his fingers, he knew. This wasn't natural. He had found it lying on the kitchen floor that morning beside Anna's stool. No drawings around it. Just the crayon. Alone, humming with something he couldn't name. He took it outside, hands trembling, and buried it under a stone near the shed. Deep, beneath frozen soil. He didn't tell Anna. That night, it was back on the kitchen table. He stared at it for a long time, then poured himself a drink. As the fire crackled, his mind drifted back to the story his grandmother used to tell, about a red stick found in the forest, always warm to the touch, that whispered dreams of things not yet happened. The elders had buried it in a tree trunk, sealed it with ash and salt. The same story had returned with different names, different years, always a red object, always a child. That week, John went searching. He spoke to Ruthie Bell again, who swore her brother had carved a red stick from a witch tree before his death. He asked old Elias, the drunk who lived in the hills, and the man said his sister used to scribble with a red chalkstone that bled when broken. Whatever it is, Elias slurred, it chooses folk, quiet ones, hurt ones. John sat up straight. Why quiet? 'Cause they don't scream when it talks. The words rooted deep. Back home, Anna hadn't spoken in days. She moved from room to room like smoke, barely noticed, only pausing to draw. Her drawings had changed again, more symbols now, less scenery. Circles with sharp points, twisted eyes, empty mouths. John had started burning them before reading. It didn't help. New ones replaced them before dawn. In a moment of desperation, he rode east, over the ridge, to find a woman folk whispered about but never named aloud. A root worker, a conjure woman. He found her cabin tucked behind a grove of black pines, marked with talismans and hanging bones. She opened the door before he knocked. "I've been waiting, Mr. Holloway." He froze. "How do you know my name?" "I seen your girl's drawings. Seen 'em in my dreams." She led him inside. The air smelled of sage and iron. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, like a forest of brittle hands. "She draw with red, don't she?" the woman asked. "Yes." "It ain't wax." "Not really." "That stick she carries ain't from this world. It's old, older than the hills. Wasn't meant for children." "What is it?" "It's a bone, painted red. Bone of a woman wronged long ago. They say she drowned with a prayer in her mouth and a curse in her fist. The crone. Her rage needed a voice. She found one." John felt his breath catch. "You mean Anna? She don't speak for herself no more." "The crayon's doing the talking." He staggered back. "How do I stop it?" The woman reached into a pouch and handed him a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a circle of silver wire, braided with horsehair and something darker. "Take her to the hollow, the place where the crayon first found her. That's where it's rooted. You burn it there with fire from ash wood lit by grief. But be warned, grief must be offered." "What do you mean?" "Grief's a cost. Something must be given. Someone." John returned home with the charm, clutching it like a talisman. He didn't yet know what he would do. He only knew he couldn't let the crayon stay in her hands. He waited until Anna slept. Her drawings covered the floor in quiet testimony. He gathered them all, each one a scream pressed into silence, and burned them in the stove. The flames turned green. The next morning, the crayon was gone. Anna stared at her empty fingers, eyes wide but not frightened, just lost. John felt a flicker of hope, until he opened his boot and found it there. Perfectly whole. John Holloway hadn't stepped foot on church grounds since Sarah's funeral. But after the crayon returned again, appearing in Anna's drawer despite locks and hidden keys, he found himself walking up the crooked path to the chapel. It was Sunday morning, and the pews were nearly full. Reverend Griggs had been replaced by a younger man, Elijah Trumbull, tall and clean-shaven, with fire in his voice but softness in his gaze. The people of Cold Spring Hollow needed saving, and they believed he might be the one to do it. After the service, John approached. "I need to talk," he said, voice low. The Reverend nodded and led him to a back room lined with hymnals and dust. "It's my daughter," John began. "Anna." Elijah sat across from him, listening as John spoke, not just about the drawings, but the red crayon, the deaths, the root worker, the fire. He didn't laugh, didn't blink. Instead, he asked, "When did it start?" John hesitated. "After her mother passed, but the crayon, she found it years ago in the woods, by the old cemetery." Reverend Elijah leaned forward. "You ever heard what Griggs did before he came here?" John shook his head. He wasn't always a preacher. Before the collar, he led revivals in the Low Country, exorcisms, wild stuff. He claimed he could see evil, said it lingered in objects, paintings, dolls, books, people. He believed in spiritual residue, the kind that clings. John stared, chills rising. "Before he died," Elijah continued, "Griggs came to me late one night. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Said he'd seen a vision, a girl with red in her hands, and that she was writing death into the world." John's stomach sank. "He meant Anna." "I think so. He said, 'The devil doesn't knock anymore. He draws.'" For a moment, silence hovered like fog. John pulled the notebook from his coat, Anna's second one, the one she'd started after the sheriff confiscated the first. Elijah leafed through the pages, his fingers trembling slightly. He paused on a drawing of the church, steeple shattered, people screaming. "This one's marked with tomorrow's date," he whispered. John nodded. "I think she's trying to warn me." "Or someone is." The Reverend closed the book. "There's something I haven't told you. A month before Griggs died, he came to me with a box of papers, sketches, childish ones, same symbols, same crayon. But they weren't Anna's." John frowned. "Then whose were they?" "A girl from 1871. Name was Adeline Moore. She lived on the same land you do now, died when she was 9. The story says she fell down a well, but Griggs thought she'd been taken. He said the drawings were found after she passed, hidden in the chimney." John's hands curled into fists. "So it's happened before?" "Yes. And each time the drawings predict not just death but judgment." That night John returned home with the old sketches Elijah had given him. He spread them on the floor beside Anna's. The resemblance was undeniable. Same jagged loops, same bleeding trees, even the same veiled woman, always standing in the background, hands folded, watching. Anna came into the room quietly, barefoot, hair tangled. John looked up. "Do you know her name?" Anna nodded. "She never says it, but I hear people whisper it when I sleep." "What do they say?" Her lips barely moved. "The one beneath." He swallowed hard. "Why you, Anna?" "She said I was empty and quiet, and that my hands could draw what others won't see." John felt a pressure in his chest. "Is she going to hurt you?" "She already does." He knelt before her. "Tell me what to do, please." She looked past him. "She said your day is close." The next morning, John found Anna sitting outside, staring at the woods. Her drawing pad lay beside her, a fresh image half-finished. It showed Reverend Elijah lying at the base of the church steps, mouth open in a scream, a red line across his chest. John burned it on the spot, but the image stayed in his mind. He returned to the chapel and showed Elijah the rest of Adeline Moore's drawings. Together they pored over details, trees twisted into numbers, shadows shaped like names. One symbol appeared again and again, a circle made of eyes. Elijah whispered, "It's a seal, a mark of ownership." "Ownership of what?" "Of her, of Anna." John stepped back. "We have to stop this." Elijah nodded. "But it won't be easy. This isn't just a possession. It's inheritance." The fire came without warning. It started just after dusk when the last glimmer of sunlight slipped behind the ridgeline. A thick plume of smoke rose from the edge of town, curling like a dark hand over the trees. John smelled it before he saw the glow. Bitter, unnatural, acrid like burning cloth and oil. He ran, heart thudding, boots pounding the dirt path. It was Mrs. Winthrop's house again, or what had remained of it after the first blaze. Someone or something had set fire to the ruins, but this time the flames spread. A neighbouring barn caught next, then another. Sparks leapt to the dry shingles of the mill, and within minutes the sky glowed red above Cold Spring Hollow. People screamed, buckets passed hand to hand in frantic rhythm. Horses shrieked in their stalls, and standing among it all, silent and still, was Anna, red crayon in hand, her eyes reflecting flame. John pulled her into his arms, shielding her from the chaos. "We have to go," he whispered. "Now." He didn't wait for an answer. He threw what supplies he could into a canvas sack, bread, jerky, matches, the silver charm the root worker had given him. Then he lifted Anna onto the horse and rode hard into the woods. Behind them the town burned. By the time they reached the tree line, the shouts were distant. The smell of smoke still clung to their clothes, but the forest wrapped around them like a shroud. Anna didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply held the crayon tight in her fist and stared into the trees. They rode for hours, deeper into the Appalachian wilds until the moon rose high and the sky settled into quiet. Then John saw the lantern glow ahead. A cabin. Small, crooked, half swallowed by moss. Elias Reed. He hadn't seen the hermit in years, not since Sarah's funeral, but the man had always kept one foot in this world and one in the next. People said he could read dreams and speak to owls. John didn't care, he needed help. Elias opened the door before John could knock. "She's been chosen, hasn't she?" he said, voice rough as pine bark. John nodded. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco and cedar. Elias led them to a low table covered in old papers and feathers. He studied Anna without speaking. Then he reached into a tin and pulled out a brittle page. "She's not the first." On the paper was a drawing, a child's faded with age but unmistakable. Red lines, eyes, graves. John stared. "Where did you get that?" "My sister drew it. 1878. Name was Eliza. She disappeared in the spring. All they found was her drawing pad and a red stone smooth as wax." Anna looked at the picture. "She sees too." Elias flinched. "You see her?" "She's not always the same. Sometimes she has no face." John turned to Elias. "I need to break it. End this. Whatever's inside that crayon, whatever speaks through it, I want it gone." The old man nodded slowly. "Then we start with where she found it." John remembered the place clearly. Anna had been 5, wandering near the edge of their land while he chopped wood. She came back holding it in her hand, grinning like she'd found treasure. He never questioned it. Elias knelt beside the hearth, pulling out a map etched on animal hide. He traced a finger down the ridges until it landed on a crude drawing of a tree surrounded by crosses. "Here, old graveyard from before the war. No one goes near it. They say the crone was buried there before her soul took root. What do? We take the crayon, burn it under moonlight with ash wood and salt. You light the fire, but grief must feed it." "What does that mean?" John asked. "You'll know when the time comes." That night John lay awake on the floor beside Anna. She slept with her hand around the crayon, her breath shallow. Elias sat in the corner, muttering prayers in a language John didn't recognize. The flames in the fireplace flickered. Outside, something moved among the trees, soft footsteps, barely audible, like silk brushing against bark. Anna stirred. "She's near," she whispered. John sat up. "The crone?" Anna's eyes opened, dark and glassy. "She's watching." He rose, tightened his coat and walked to the window. Far off beyond the trees a single figure stood, draped in shadow, veil trailing like smoke. Watching, waiting. The path to the old cemetery was nearly invisible, choked with vines, half swallowed by the earth. Elias led the way with a lantern swinging from his hand, its glow casting strange shapes across the trees. John followed close behind, one hand on Anna's shoulder, the other gripping the satchel that held the crayon wrapped in cloth and salt. No one spoke. The woods seemed to listen. They reached the clearing just before midnight. Moonlight spilled across crooked stones and rusted iron crosses. The air was still, too still. Even the crickets had gone quiet. "This is where she was buried," Elias said, gesturing to a mound at the far end marked only by a jagged rock. "They say she wasn't born of flesh, but of sorrow. A woman wronged, drowned by her kin, cursed in her final breath." Anna's eyes fixed on the grave. "She's under us." John knelt and unwrapped the crayon. It pulsed faintly in his palm, warm, as if alive. Elias built the fire with care. Ash wood stacked in a circle, salt sprinkled around the perimeter. He handed John the silver charm. "When the flames rise, speak her name if you know it." "I don't." "You will." John stepped into the circle. The air thickened instantly, as though pressing inward. He struck the match. The fire roared to life. Too quickly, too hot. The flames turned blue, then black. Shadows spun around them, flickering and shifting. The ground beneath their feet trembled. Anna began to hum, not her usual wandering melody, but a song, low and steady, words in a language no one taught her. "She's waking," Elias whispered. "Now. Burn it." John held the crayon over the fire, but his hand wouldn't move. It shook, frozen in place. A pressure built in his chest, like something invisible pushing back. Then a voice, low, female, echoing from beneath the soil. "Not yet." John gritted his teeth, forcing his arm forward. The crayon hovered over the flames, wax starting to melt. Then Anna screamed. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, her voice rising in agony. "She's inside! She's inside!" John recoiled. The fire flared higher, licking the sky. Elias tossed in a handful of salt. "Do it now, Holloway, do it." But John hesitated. He looked at Anna, writhing in the dirt, eyes wide with pain. And he understood. She wasn't just a vessel. She was the anchor. If he destroyed the crayon, would it break her too? "I can't," he choked. "Not if it kills her." "She'll die anyway," Elias snapped. "She's not her anymore. No, she's still in there." The voice came again, closer, colder. "She belongs to me." And then the fire exploded outward. Wind howled through the clearing. Trees bent backward, groaning under the pressure. The salt circles scattered, and from the grave a shape emerged. A figure cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a veil of hair, her arms too long, her hands clawed and red. The crone. She moved without walking, gliding over stone and soil, her presence suffocating. Elias raised the charm, shouting words of banishment. The crone hissed, but Anna stood. She rose slowly, arms hanging limp, eyes dark as pitch. "She says she'll trade," Anna murmured. John stepped forward. "Trade what?" "A soul. One for hers, one of grief." The wind fell silent. Then the crone spoke, not through voice, but through thought, carved directly into John's mind. "Give me what I lost. Grief for grief, pain for pain." He understood. He saw flashes, images not his own. A child drowned in a well, a mother torn from her arms, a rope, a river, a promise never fulfilled. The crone had been a woman once, and she had lost everything. Now she wanted John's grief. He knelt, pulled the crayon from the cloth, and held it over the flame again. "I give you my sorrow," he said. "Take it. Let her go." The fire surged. Anna's eyes rolled back. John felt something tear loose inside him, a memory, vivid and raw. Sarah's last breath, her cold hand in his, the silence after. He felt it all again, doubled, sharpened, unbearable. The crone reached toward him and vanished. The flames shrank to embers. Anna collapsed. John caught her before she hit the ground, crayon slipping from her fingers, now blackened, cracked, lifeless. Elias stepped into the circle, voice hushed. "You gave her grief." and bought your girl's soul." John looked at Anna, breathing softly, colour returning to her cheeks. "She's free," he whispered. "For now." They didn't speak as they left the graveyard. The woods felt quieter than before, as though the trees had exhaled. The path back to Elias's cabin was slow and unsteady. Anna leaned against John, her steps unsure, like someone learning to walk again. She didn't speak, didn't hum. Her hands hung loose, empty. The red crayon, now fractured and dull, stayed wrapped in cloth inside John's coat. Elias walked behind them, muttering prayers under his breath. When they reached the cabin, dawn had begun to stretch fingers of grey across the horizon. John settled Anna into the cot, pulled a blanket over her, then sat beside the cold hearth. He didn't sleep. He didn't need to. The exhaustion in his bones wasn't the kind rest could fix. Elias stirred a pot of something over the fireless stove. "She'll rest for a while. Might not remember it." John ran a hand over his face. "What happens now?" The old man shrugged. "That depends. You burned the vessel, not the memory. Some things fade. Others lie low. You might have quiet years. Or quiet days." John stared at the floor. "I felt her grief." Elias nodded. "You took it on. That's what saved her. It's still inside me. That's the deal." Outside, the wind picked up. Not a howl, not a shriek, just the soft rustle of leaves, like whispers passing from one tree to another. That afternoon, Anna awoke. She blinked at the ceiling, then looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. When her gaze landed on John, she smiled. It was small, faint, but it was real. "I'm tired," she said softly. John squeezed her hand. "You're safe." They stayed in Elias's cabin for 2 more days, letting the forest shield them from what had burned behind. No one came. No riders from the hollow, no search parties, no sermons. On the 3rd morning, John packed their things. Elias walked them to the edge of the trees. "Keep her near clean ground," he said. "Near water, near light. That helps." John nodded. "Thank you." Elias placed something in his hand, a bundle of ash bark wrapped in black thread. "For protection." John tucked it in his coat. They returned to Cold Spring Hollow just after sunrise. What they found was silence. Half the town had emptied out. Some houses were boarded shut. Others stood open, abandoned, curtains fluttering through broken windows. Ash marked the ground near the old church, though the building still stood. The sheriff was gone, no one knew where. Others, Mrs. Dobbins, Ruthie Bell, had left without word. Reverend Elijah remained. He greeted them at the crossroads with eyes full of cautious relief. "She okay?" he asked. John nodded. "Tired, but herself." Elijah stepped aside, letting them pass. "People still talk, but softer now." "What about the fire?" "They call it judgment. Some say it was the devil. Others say God sent it to cleanse the town." John didn't answer. He brought Anna home. The house felt different, empty but not haunted. He opened windows, let in air, burned sage and pine. He threw out the drawings, the paper, the broken frames, every trace. Anna started humming again, but now the tune had shape, rising and falling, like a lullaby someone used to sing. She spent time in the garden, picked wildflowers. Sometimes she asked about her mother, and John would tell her stories, not the ones shaped by grief, but the ones shaped by memory. One afternoon she brought him a sketch, drawn in charcoal, not crayon. It was a tree, whole, blooming, no shadows, no graves. He hung it on the wall, but at night he still dreamed of the crone, not in anger, but in mourning. She stood beside a well, her veil trailing in the wind. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her sorrow was a soundless weight. He'd feel it pressing into his chest like cold water. He'd wake, gasping. Still, each day moved forward, and Anna remained steady. One evening she sat by the window, watching the woods. John noticed her fingers twitching, as if remembering something they used to do. She caught his gaze and quickly looked away. "Sometimes I hear her," she whispered, "but she's far now, farther than before." He nodded. If she comes close again, we'll know." They didn't say more. They didn't need to. Something had changed, not just in Anna or in John, but in the hollow itself. The trees didn't bend the same. The wind carried different stories. But beneath it all, buried deep, the memory still pulsed. Not gone, not ever, just waiting. It happened on a Tuesday. John had gone into town for flour and kerosene, leaving Anna at home with strict instructions to stay indoors. She was better now, but not invulnerable, not untethered from the dark entirely. He trusted her, but he didn't trust the hollow. Not anymore. When he returned, something was wrong. The front door stood ajar. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. "Anna?" he called. No answer. He dropped the sack and moved through the rooms. Nothing broken, nothing stolen, just absence. Then he saw the note on the table. 4 words, scrawled in blocky charcoal. "She's come for me." His stomach dropped. Outside, tracks led toward the woods. Smaller footprints, fresh. He followed. The path narrowed quickly, overgrown with moss and roots. The deeper he went, the darker it grew, light fading even in daylight. He heard nothing. Not birds, not insects. Just wind threading between the trees like a whisper. Then he saw it, a clearing, the cave. He hadn't known it was there, not really. But Anna had drawn it once, years ago. A black mouth in the hillside circled in red. She stood at its edge, hands by her sides. He rushed forward. "Anna." She turned slowly. "She's waiting," she said. "Inside." John grabbed her hand. "You're not going in there." "She says I have to." "No," he growled. "We ended this. You're free." She said, "I'm only free if I choose." John's breath hitched. "Choose what?" Anna looked up at him, eyes wide but calm. "To give her something else." The wind howled. John turned toward the cave. The darkness inside rippled, alive, watching. And then the voice returned. Inside his head, old and cold, brushing against thought like cobwebs. "Come. One more grief. One more gift." "No," he whispered. "You had what you wanted. I gave you pain. It ends here." But the voice pressed harder. "Or she stays, always, always drawing." He stepped forward, heart pounding. "What do you want?" "You." The cave pulsed. "The father's grief is the deepest. His sorrow fed me once. It will feed me again. Stay. Give her light." John looked at Anna. Her lips trembled. "Please don't go." He knelt before her, hands shaking. "Do you want her gone, truly gone?" "No," she said. "I want her quiet." He turned toward the cave. The choice was his. One grief, for peace. His steps were slow, each one heavier than the last. The mouth of the cave swallowed sound. Cold air rushed past him. His body trembled, but not from fear, from finality. He crossed the threshold. Darkness enveloped him, and the silence welcomed him. Back at the cave's mouth, Anna waited. The wind eased. Then light, a small pulse from within, and a voice, faint, like an echo from far away. "Go, Anna." She stepped back, and the cave closed. Not with rock or stone, but with stillness. It simply wasn't there anymore. Elias found her hours later, sitting where the cave had been, her face streaked with tears but calm. She looked at him and said, "He gave her the last story." They returned to the hollow. Anna didn't draw again, not with crayons, not with charcoal. Her hands remained steady but idle. She sang sometimes, soft tunes without words. She smiled at birds, gathered herbs, whispered to trees. The darkness did not return. John Holloway was gone, but something in the world had been set right, or at least. Sleep. They called it a trial, but it was never about justice. Word had spread that Anna Lee had returned from the woods, alone, that her father had vanished, that something unnatural had taken place in the hollow beyond the ridge. People whispered it over fence posts, in pews between bites of bread. Fear had returned, and this time it wore the face of a little girl. It didn't take long. Sheriff Darnell reappeared, nervous, pale. Not the man he'd been before the fire. He'd fled then and now returned with a Bible in one hand and a rope in the other. He didn't come alone. Men followed him, armed and wide-eyed, their faith thin but loud. They found Anna sitting on her porch, drawing in the dirt with a stick. When they surrounded her, she didn't run. "She's been touched," one man said. "She called the fire," said another. Sheriff Darnell only pointed. "Bring her to the church." They dragged her there at dusk. The building was cold inside, its pews half empty, its windows fogged. The bell hadn't rung in weeks. The altar had been scorched in the fire, the cross above it charred black. They placed Anna on a stool in the center, bound her wrists. The town gathered in uneasy silence. Darnell stood beside the pulpit, his voice cracking as he spoke. "This girl brought death, fire, madness. We let it fester once. We won't again." Anna didn't look at him. Her gaze drifted upward, toward the broken steeple. A low murmur swept through the church. Some cried. Others bowed their heads. Then the questions began. "Do you hear voices? Do you speak to spirits? Did you kill your father?" To each, Anna gave the same answer. "No." Until one question made her pause. "Are you alone?" She didn't speak. Just blinked. Once. Darnell turned to the crowd. "She won't confess, but we've seen the signs." They began to chant. Quietly at first, then louder. "Cleanse her. Cleanse her. Cleanse her." The air grew thick. Hannah closed her eyes, and then the church bell tolled once, twice, then faster. It rang with no hand to pull it, no wind to shake it. The sound was wrong, hollow, crooked, like a voice trying to mimic another. The crowd fell silent. Then the hallucinations began. Mabel Griggs saw her own funeral, casket shut, her husband weeping. Ruthie Bell saw herself aflame, her hands melting like wax. Darnell saw the rope in his own grip looped around his neck. They screamed. They clawed at invisible things. They fled. Only Anna remained still. Then a shape appeared at the doorway. Black veil, no face, hands like ink. The crone. But she didn't enter. She just stood, watching. And in that moment, John Holloway appeared. Not whole, not alive, but something else. He walked past the crowd as if they weren't there. His steps slow, his eyes hollow. He stopped beside Anna, placed one hand on her shoulder. She looked up and smiled. "Papa." The vision shattered. The church fell silent. The crone vanished. The hallucinations ended, and the people of Cold Spring Hollow wept, not for fear but for shame. John's image faded. Anna's bonds loosened on their own. She stood, stepped down from the stool, and walked out the front doors into the morning light. No one stopped her. Behind her, the bell swayed once more, and then was still. The town didn't speak of what happened in the church. They boarded the doors the next morning, nailed shut with planks and salt as if sealing something away. The bell never rang again, but Anna kept walking, not aimlessly. Not afraid, towards something. Elias found her at the edge of the ridge, eyes fixed on the horizon. "She's stirring," Anna said. "The crayon's not dead, just sleeping." He nodded slowly. "It has to be broken, not hidden, not buried, broken." She looked up. "You know how?" He placed a hand on her shoulder. "There's a ritual older than the crone, a final fire. But it must burn where the veil is thinnest." Anna turned her gaze toward the eastern hills, the old chapel, before the town. Elias's jaw tightened. Yes, the first place she touched, the first grave. If we light it there, it ends, but only with ash, salt, and something that was once hers. Anna opened her hand, the red crayon, fractured, blackened, but whole enough. She gave it back. Just before she vanished, Elias's eyes narrowed. "Then we must go, now." The journey took hours. They walked through dead valleys and forgotten fields, past places neither had seen since childhood. The land felt older here, tired. Trees leaned low as if listening. The sky hung heavy with clouds. At dusk, they reached the ruins. The chapel was nothing more than stones and earth, overgrown with moss, its roof long gone. But the altar still stood, cracked, leaning but intact. Elias prepared the circle: ash from charred pine, salt from the mines, candle wicks soaked in oil. Anna stepped forward and placed the crayon on the altar. The ground trembled. Elias lit the flame. A ring of fire surged around the crayon, flickering in unnatural colors: blue, black, green. The air snapped and twisted, warping with every gust. "She's coming," Elias whispered. The wind rose. From the trees, shapes emerged. Not bodies, memories. Girls who'd held the crayon before. Adeline, Eliza, others without names. They stood, watching, silent. Anna fell to her knees. "She's in me again." Elias tossed herbs into the fire. "Hold on, girl, don't let her speak." "She's not speaking," Anna cried. "She's screaming." The fire blazed higher, the ground cracked, and from the flames the crone stepped out. Not veiled, not hidden. Her face was bone and shadow. Her eyes were holes that wept ash. Her mouth was wide and wordless. She pointed at Anna. Elias raised the charm. "She is not yours." The crone shrieked, a sound that fractured stone and sky. The spirits trembled, the wind screamed. Anna clutched her head, blood trickling from her nose. "She says it was never the crayon. It was her. Always her." "Then burn her name," Elias shouted. "I don't know it." "Yes, you do." Anna looked up and remembered. The word came not from memory, but from blood. Passed down in whispers, carved into bone. "Morvena!" The fire exploded. The crone screamed once more, then burst into a cloud of red ash. The crayon cracked, split in two. The spirits vanished, and silence fell. Anna collapsed. Elias caught her. "She's gone," she whispered. He nodded. "She's gone." The flames shrank, and at the center of the altar only dust remained. No crayon, no voice, no curse. Only stillness. Anna woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, warm, golden, unburdened. Not the filtered grey of the hollow or the pale shimmer of a cursed forest, but something honest. She blinked against it, breathing in air that smelled like pine and morning dew. Elias sat nearby, stirring a pot of broth. His back was stiff, movement slow, but his presence was steady. "It's done," he said without looking at her. Anna sat up slowly. Her limbs ached, but her chest was light. "I don't hear her anymore," she said. Then it truly ended. They stayed in the hills for 3 days. Elias taught her how to gather clean herbs, how to carve sigils of protection, not from fear, but remembrance. She didn't draw. Not once. Her hands were still, her fingers no longer twitching. The pull was gone. She didn't miss it. On the morning of the 4th day, they returned to Cold Spring Hollow. The town was quieter than before. Shutters hung loose. Gardens had gone untended. Children played in silence. But there was no dread in the air, just weariness, like the land itself had taken a long breath. Anna passed the boarded-up church. No one had removed the nails. The bell remained still. She passed the general store where Ruthie Bell once gossiped and glared. Now it stood empty. She passed the schoolhouse. No voices rang from inside. The windows were shut tight. At home, the porch was covered in leaves. John's chair sat in its place, unmoved. She stood there for a long time before opening the door. Inside, everything remained as they left it. The air was stale, the hearth cold, but it was home. She lit a candle, swept the dust, and opened every window. Light poured in. Later that evening, she found the sketch John had framed, the charcoal drawing of the blooming tree. It had fallen to the floor, but wasn't damaged. She hung it back on the wall. That night, she dreamt of her father. He stood by the window looking out over the hollow, his silhouette calm. "You did it," he said. She smiled. "You helped. I always will." She reached for him, but he stepped back into shadow. "You don't need me now. I still want you." "I know," he said, voice softer. "But wanting isn't the same as needing." She woke with tears in her eyes, but no pain in her chest. That morning she walked to the creek and sat among the cattails, humming. Birds sang. A deer crossed the stream. She felt the sun on her face. Later, a few neighbors came by, quiet, hesitant. They didn't ask questions. They brought bread, a quilt, a bundle of lavender. No one spoke of the fire. No one asked about the trial. They just nodded and left things on the porch. By the second week, the hollow began to move again. Smoke rose from chimneys, voices returned to porches, and Anna began to plant. She dug into the soil behind the house, turned it fresh, lined rows with string and care, tomatoes, corn, wildflowers. Her fingers darkened with dirt instead of red wax. She worked with quiet joy. Elias visited every Sunday. He brought tea and they'd sit by the fire and speak of simple things. Sometimes he'd tell her stories, old ones, not warnings, but lessons, about the trees, about the wind, about how every silence holds a memory and every shadow a story. "Will it ever come back?" she asked once. "Not that one," he said. "But others might. That's the way of the world." Anna nodded. She didn't feel afraid. One morning she woke to a red sunrise. The sky was alight, but not with fire, just dawn. She stood on the porch watching, her hands wrapped around a warm cup. There was no humming in her ears, no whispers in her mind, only the wind, only peace, only the beginning of something new. Years passed. Cold Spring Hollow remained small, quiet, unremarkable to most. But to Anna Lee it became something else, a place she could live without fear, without eyes watching her every move, without whispers behind curtains. She grew into herself. At 17, she wore her hair tied back, her skirts dusted with earth from the garden rows. People no longer crossed the street to avoid her. Some even asked for herbs, for advice. They never said her name too loud, and no one ever mentioned the fire. But when they looked at her, there was something in their eyes. Respect, maybe, or caution. Elias died the winter she turned 16. Peacefully, in sleep, his hands folded over a book of songs. He left her his charm bag and a short note. "You don't owe the dark anything anymore." She buried him beneath the sycamore where the wind could reach him. By 21, she'd restored the old schoolhouse and begun teaching. Just a few children at first, then more. They sat cross-legged on rugs she wove by hand. She taught them their letters, their sums, and how to listen to the world when it's silent. She never taught them to draw, not with red. On the morning of her 22nd birthday, she returned to the old Holloway house. It had stood vacant since she moved to the teacher's cottage. Ivy climbed its beams, but it still breathed like a memory. She opened the door, stepped inside. Dust motes floated through the air. The wooden floors creaked underfoot. Everything smelled of time. She climbed the stairs to the attic. Boxes of folded quilts, her father's tools, the scent of coal and cedar. And then she saw it. On the far wall, low, near the floorboards, a small box, unmarked, untouched. Her chest tightened. She knelt and opened it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a single red crayon. Whole. Unbroken. Her breath caught. She reached for it, then stopped. It hadn't been there before. Not when she cleaned. Not when she left. Not ever. But now it waited. She picked it up gently. It was warm. A whisper brushed the edge of her mind. Soft, gentle, familiar. She closed her eyes. No images came, no screams, no graves, only the faint sensation of being remembered. Anna placed it back in the box. She didn't destroy it, not this time. She wrapped it in salt and rosemary, sealed it with wax and buried it beneath the floorboards. Not to trap it, but to keep it safe. That night, as she lay in bed, she dreamed of a girl, not herself. Another. Brown hair, dirt-streaked cheeks, eyes full of wonder. The girl held a piece of chalk and drew stars in the dirt. Anna watched her from a distance. And in the dream, the wind whispered, "She'll come next." She woke with a calm heart. The crayon no longer needed her, but it was still in the world. And something, or someone, would find it again. Some say Evil dies when the flame goes out. Others believe it sleeps. But in Cold Spring Hollow, where trees grow thick and silence clings like fog, no one speaks in absolutes anymore. They remember Anna Lee. They remember the fire, the drawings, the girl with the red crayon who stared into death and came back with something more than survival. And though years passed, though the world moved on, something old still lingered beneath the soil. One summer morning, a new family arrived in the hollow. The mother was quiet. The father smiled too wide. The daughter, Clara, was 5. She liked to collect stones and stack them in patterns no one taught her. They moved into the old Watkins house, rebuilt after the fire, wood still pale with newness. Clara wandered the property that first week, exploring the edges of the woods with the fearlessness of children. One evening she ran back inside, clutching something in her tiny hand. "Look what I found," she said. Her mother bent down. It was a crayon, red, smooth, perfect. Her mother laughed. "Where'd you get that, honey?" "It was under the floor," Clara said. "In the corner. It whispered to me." The mother chuckled and set it on the windowsill. "Maybe it's magic." Clara smiled. That night she drew her first picture. It was a house, not theirs. It burned. 2 days later, news came from over the ridge. An old farmhouse had caught fire. No one hurt, just lost. Clara drew again. This time, it was a woman falling into a river. Then it happened. The whisper had returned, but not to Anna, to another, and the hollow watched. So, was Anna Lee truly free? Or did she become a chapter in a book still being written? What we know is this: grief leaves marks. And some objects, some stories, carry those marks forward from hand to hand, soul to soul. Anna gave everything to end it, but something always remains, sometimes buried, sometimes waiting. If you've followed Anna's journey this far, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, haunting, strange, unforgettable. And if you're brave enough for what comes next, click the video on your screen now to dive deeper into the hollow. The next tale is already waiting, and it's calling your name.